2 years after the collapse of his empire, Marcus Williams sat in a small apartment in a suburb far from the gleaming towers where he had once ruled. The federal prison sentence for racketeering and labor trafficking had been reduced to 18 months due to his cooperation with ongoing investigations, but the real punishment was the complete destruction of his identity and status. The apartment was a far cry from his former penthouse office. Cramped, poorly lit, and furnished with second-hand items, it represented everything Marcus Williams had spent his life trying to escape. His father's legacy of poverty and insignificance had finally caught up with him. Despite all his efforts to build something greater, Marcus Williams had lost everything in the legal settlements and criminal restitution payments. His luxury cars, his investment portfolio, his real estate holdings, all liquidated to compensate the employees he had systematically abused. The man who had once controlled the financial destinies of hundreds of people now struggled to pay rent on a one-bedroom apartment. But the financial devastation was nothing compared to the social isolation. Former business associates refused his calls. Professional networks had expelled him. Even casual acquaintances crossed the street to avoid conversation. Marcus Williams had become a pariah in the business community that had once celebrated his success. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent years studying how to manipulate vulnerable people, and now he had become vulnerable himself. The psychological techniques he had perfected for controlling others provided no protection against his own desperation and despair. Emma Rodriguez, meanwhile, had built a new life in Silicon Valley that exceeded her wildest dreams from her days at TechVision Industries. Her courage in exposing Marcus Williams had made her a sought-after leader in the tech industry. She now served as Chief Technology Officer at an innovative startup that prioritized employee well-being and ethical business practices. Her father's health had stabilized, thanks to excellent medical coverage provided by her new employer. Her student loans were paid off. She owned a beautiful home in a safe neighborhood. Most importantly, she woke up each morning excited about her work rather than dreading another day of psychological manipulation and abuse. Emma had also become a prominent advocate for workplace rights, speaking at conferences and consulting with companies that wanted to create healthy, productive cultures. Her story had inspired federal legislation strengthening protections for employees in high-stress industries. During one of her speaking engagements, a young programmer approached Emma after her presentation. "I'm working at a company that reminds me of your TechVision stories," the young woman said nervously. "The CEO uses our personal problems against us and we're all too scared to complain. What should we do?" Emma smiled warmly. "You do exactly what we did. Document everything, find allies, and remember that your strength comes from standing together. No one person has the right to destroy other people's lives for profit, no matter how much power they think they have." David Rodriguez had also thrived after leaving TechVision Industries. He was now a senior financial analyst at a nonprofit organization focused on corporate accountability, using his skills to investigate companies suspected of employee abuse. His mother's cancer was in remission, and the family's financial stress had completely disappeared. The secret network that had brought down Marcus Williams had evolved into a formal organization called Workplace Justice Alliance, providing resources and support for employees facing systematic abuse. They maintained a database of companies with documented problems, helping job seekers avoid toxic environments. One evening, while reviewing case files for potentially abusive companies, David received an unexpected phone call. The caller identified himself as a former TechVision employee who had witnessed the auditorium confrontation but hadn't participated in the rebellion. "I wanted to thank you and Emma," the caller said. "I was too scared to speak up at the time, but watching you fight back gave me courage to leave that place. I've been at a much better company for over a year now, and my life is completely different. Sometimes I think about how miserable I was at TechVision and wonder how I ever tolerated that treatment." These calls came regularly, former TechVision employees sharing their recovery stories and new success. Marcus Williams' reign of terror had ended, but the healing process for his victims continued. Marcus Williams had tried several times to rebuild his career, but his reputation made employment impossible. A few small companies had initially shown interest in his business experience, but internet searches quickly revealed his criminal history and the extent of his abusive practices. He was permanently unemployable in any position of authority. The psychological impact was devastating. Marcus Williams had defined himself entirely through power and control over others. Without those things, he had no identity and no purpose. He spent his days applying for entry-level positions that he was overqualified for, but couldn't obtain due to his background. During one particularly dark period, Marcus Williams found himself standing outside the TechVision Industries building, watching current employees enter and exit. The company had not only survived his departure but had thrived under new leadership that prioritized employee well-being. The building that had once been his kingdom now represented everything he had lost. A security guard noticed Marcus Williams lingering on the sidewalk and approached him. "Excuse me, sir, but you're not allowed on company property." Marcus Williams looked at the young guard, probably an entry-level employee making near minimum wage, and realized that this person now had more authority and respect than he did. The reversal was complete and humiliating. Emma occasionally thought about Marcus Williams and wondered what had become of him. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only sadness that someone had chosen to build their success on the systematic destruction of other people's lives. The energy she had once devoted to fighting his abuse was now channeled into building positive alternatives. The lasting impact of the TechVision Industries scandal extended far beyond the individual participants. Business schools now taught case studies about the importance of ethical leadership and the dangers of toxic corporate cultures. Labor laws had been strengthened. Employee protection organizations had expanded their resources and reach. Marcus Williams' story had become a cautionary tale about the consequences of treating human beings as disposable resources. His empire of fear had been replaced by a movement toward workplace dignity and respect. The man who had promised wealth for obedience had discovered that true power comes from lifting others up, rather than tearing them down. In the end, Marcus Williams's greatest legacy wasn't the company he had built, or the profits he had generated. It was the lesson his downfall taught about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their economic vulnerability or desperate circumstances. The employees he had tried to break had not only survived, but had created something better from the ashes of his empire. They had proven that courage, solidarity, and truth could overcome even the most sophisticated systems of oppression. Marcus Williams had promised wealth for obedience, but he had never anticipated that his victims would choose dignity over desperation, and in making that choice, they would destroy everything he had built on their suffering. Within hours of the auditorium confrontation, TechVision Industries became the center of a media firestorm that Marcus Williams could never have anticipated. Lisa Chen's investigative report hit the front page of the city's largest newspaper, complete with recorded conversations, documented evidence, and testimonies from dozens of current and former employees. The headline read, "Tech CEO's Empire of Fear, Inside the Systematic Abuse at TechVision Industries." The article detailed Marcus Williams's psychological manipulation tactics, his exploitation of vulnerable employees, and his deliberate creation of a culture based on financial desperation and emotional terror. Emma Rodriguez found herself at the center of the storm, fielding calls from reporters, lawyers, and labor rights organizations. Her phone had been ringing continuously since the morning meeting, but the most important call came from her father at the hospital. "Emma, I saw the news," her father said, his voice weak but proud. "I'm so sorry that my medical bills put you in that terrible situation, but I'm so proud of how you fought back." Emma felt tears running down her cheeks. "Dad, you don't need to apologize. What Marcus Williams did was criminal. No one should have to choose between their family's health and their own dignity." Meanwhile, Marcus Williams was experiencing the collapse of his carefully constructed empire. Board members were demanding emergency meetings. Investors were pulling funding. Major clients were canceling contracts. The company's stock price had dropped 30% in a single trading session. Robert Crane, the board chairman, called an emergency meeting for that afternoon. Marcus Williams arrived at the boardroom to find a room full of hostile faces and a stack of legal documents on the conference table. "Marcus, we've reviewed the evidence published in today's news reports," Robert said, his voice cold and formal. "The board has voted unanimously to remove you as CEO, effective immediately. Your employment contract is terminated for cause, which means no severance package and no stock options. Marcus Williams felt the ground shifting beneath him. "Robert, you know these are just disgruntled employees making false accusations. We can fight this. We can discredit these people. We've seen the recordings, Marcus. We've read the internal documents. We've spoken with our legal team." Robert's voice was final. "Tech Vision Industries cannot survive this scandal with you as CEO. Security will escort you from the building, and all company assets and access codes are being revoked." For the first time in his career, Marcus Williams experienced the helplessness that he had inflicted on so many others. The psychological tactics that had made him feel powerful and in control were now being used against him by people with more resources and influence. Emma and her allies watched the news coverage from David Rodriguez's apartment, where they had gathered to coordinate their response to media requests and legal proceedings. The Department of Labor had announced a formal investigation into Tech Vision Industries. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was reviewing discrimination complaints. Several law firms were organizing class action lawsuits on behalf of current and former employees. "I still can't believe we actually did it," Janet said, watching a news segment about Marcus Williams being escorted from the Tech Vision building by security guards. "6 months ago, I was too scared to even complain about working weekends." David nodded, looking exhausted but relieved. The scariest part was realizing how many of us had been suffering in silence. Marcus Williams made us think we were isolated and helpless, but we were actually the majority. Emma's phone rang again. This time it was a call from a major tech company in Silicon Valley, offering her a senior developer position with a salary nearly double what she had been making at Tech Vision. Similar offers had been coming in throughout the day, as news of the rebellion spread through the tech industry. "Ms. Rodriguez, we've been following your story," the recruiter said. "We'd love to discuss opportunities with someone who has demonstrated such courage and leadership. When would be convenient for an interview?" Emma realized that her worst fears about career destruction had been completely wrong. Instead of being blacklisted, she and her allies were being courted by companies that valued integrity and employee advocacy. Marcus Williams' threats about destroying careers had been exposed as hollow intimidation tactics. The next few weeks brought a parade of revelations about the scope of Marcus Williams' abusive system. Former employees came forward with stories of psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and systematic harassment. The private investigation firm that Marcus Williams had hired to gather blackmail material was raided by federal agents. The secret fund he had used to create debt bondage was exposed as a violation of labor trafficking laws. Sarah Chen, the former head of human resources, testified before a congressional subcommittee about corporate abuse in the tech industry. Her testimony revealed that Marcus Williams had been developing his exploitation techniques for years, refining them based on research into psychological manipulation and behavioral control. "Mr. Williams didn't just create a hostile work environment," Sarah testified. "He created a sophisticated system for breaking down human dignity and rebuilding it in service to corporate profits. He studied his employees like laboratory subjects, documenting their vulnerabilities and designing specific strategies to exploit their desperation." The legal consequences for Marcus Williams mounted daily. Criminal charges included fraud, racketeering, and labor trafficking. Civil lawsuits sought damages for emotional distress, lost wages, and systematic abuse. His personal assets were frozen as courts calculated the scope of restitution owed to his victims. Marcus Williams hired the best legal team his remaining money could buy, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Recordings of his voice, documents in his handwriting, and testimony from dozens of witnesses created an unassailable case for prosecution. During one court appearance, Emma found herself face-to-face with Marcus Williams for the first time since the auditorium confrontation. He looked smaller somehow, his confident demeanor replaced by the haunted expression of someone who had lost everything. Their eyes met briefly across the courtroom, and Emma saw something she had never expected: fear. Marcus Williams was experiencing the same helplessness and terror that he had systematically inflicted on others. The psychological tables had been completely turned. Tech Vision Industries, under new leadership, began implementing employee protection policies and mental health support programs. The company survived the scandal, but only after completely restructuring its culture and management practices. Many of Marcus Williams' victims, including Emma, chose to pursue opportunities elsewhere rather than remain at the company that had abused them. Emma accepted the Silicon Valley position, using her signing bonus to pay off her student loans and her father's medical bills. For the first time in years, she felt financially secure and professionally valued. The fear and desperation that had defined her life at TechVision became distant memories. But the most satisfying outcome wasn't personal. It was systemic. Emma's rebellion had inspired similar movements at other companies, where employees were being systematically exploited. Labor rights organizations were using the TechVision case as a model for identifying and combating psychological manipulation in corporate environments. Marcus Williams's downfall had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of absolute power and the inevitable consequences of treating human beings as disposable resources. His empire of fear had been destroyed by the very people he had tried to break, proving that even the most sophisticated systems of oppression could be overcome by courage, solidarity, and truth. The morning after the company retreat, Emma Rodriguez walked into TechVision Industries knowing that everything was about to change. She and her secret group of allies had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but nothing could eliminate the fear that Marcus Williams might discover their plan before they could execute it. Emma's first stop was David Rodriguez's cubicle. As planned, David had called in sick, giving him the freedom to coordinate with journalist Lisa Chen and prepare the external aspects of their exposure strategy. Janet and Mike were also strategically positioned throughout the building, ready to document any retaliation attempts by Marcus Williams. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At exactly 10 o'clock during the company's mandatory Monday morning meeting, Emma would present Marcus Williams with a formal complaint about workplace conditions. This complaint would be deliberately mild, designed to trigger his typical aggressive response. Unknown to Marcus Williams, his reaction would be recorded and broadcast live to local news stations through Lisa Chen's media contacts. At 9:30, Emma received a text message from David. Lisa is in position with camera crews. Legal team standing by. Board members have been contacted. No turning back now. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she gathered her documentation and prepared for the confrontation that would either destroy Marcus Williams' empire or destroy her own career forever. She thought about her father's medical bills, her student loan debt, and all the other financial pressures that had made her vulnerable to Marcus Williams' manipulation. Today, those same vulnerabilities would become her strength. The company meeting began as usual, with Marcus Williams standing at the front of the auditorium, radiating the cold confidence that had intimidated employees for years. He discussed quarterly goals, productivity metrics, and new efficiency initiatives that would increase workload while maintaining current staffing levels. Before we conclude, Marcus Williams said, I want to address the importance of loyalty and discretion. Recent events have reminded me that some employees may be confused about their obligations to this company. Let me be clear. TechVision Industries provides opportunities that most people only dream of. In return, we expect absolute dedication and confidentiality. His words were clearly directed at employees who might be considering external job opportunities or questioning company policies. Emma recognized the veiled threat and knew this was her moment. She stood up from her seat in the middle of the auditorium. Mr. Williams, I have some concerns about our workplace policies that I'd like to discuss. The auditorium fell completely silent. Employees turned to stare at Emma with expressions of shock and terror. No one interrupted Marcus Williams during company meetings. No one questioned his authority in public forums. Emma had just committed career suicide in front of the entire company. Marcus Williams' face showed a brief flicker of surprise before settling into his characteristic cold smile. Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it? These concerns should be addressed through proper channels. Please see me after the meeting. I think these concerns affect everyone here, Emma replied, her voice carrying throughout the silent auditorium. Our employee handbook promises fair compensation, reasonable working hours, and a safe work environment. Many of us are working 70 to 80 hours per week for salaries below industry standards while being threatened with termination if we don't comply with demands that violate labor laws. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus Williams's eyes narrowed, and Emma could see the calculation happening behind them. He was deciding whether to crush this rebellion immediately or wait until he could handle it privately. Ms. Rodriguez, you're clearly confused about your employment agreement, Marcus Williams said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Perhaps your current workload has affected your judgment. I'm sure we can address your concerns through appropriate channels. Emma pulled out her phone and activated the recording app. Actually, I'd like to address them now since they affect everyone in this room. Could you explain why employee files contain psychological profiles designed to exploit personal vulnerabilities? Could you clarify why the company hires private investigators to gather blackmail material on employees' families? The auditorium erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. Employees began looking at each other with new understanding, realizing that their suspicions about systematic manipulation had been correct. Marcus Williams's mask finally slipped. His face flushed with rage and his voice became sharp and threatening. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and Ms. Rodriguez, you should be very careful about making false accusations against this company. We have excellent legal representation. I'm sure you do, Emma replied calmly, but I wonder how they'll handle defending against the evidence that's already been submitted to the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and several news organizations. The color drained from Marcus Williams' face. For the first time in his career, he appeared genuinely rattled. Around the auditorium, employees were pulling out their phones to record the confrontation, no longer afraid of the consequences. Janet stood up from her seat near the back. Emma's right. I've been documenting illegal surveillance and privacy violations for months. This company systematically targets vulnerable people and exploits their desperation. Mike joined the rebellion from his position near the front. The IT department has been forced to implement monitoring systems that violate employee privacy rights. We've been tracking bathroom breaks, personal communications, and even medical information. More employees began standing and sharing their experiences. The dam of fear that Marcus Williams had built through years of psychological manipulation was finally breaking. Workers who had been isolated and terrified were discovering that they weren't alone in their suffering. Marcus Williams tried to regain control. This meeting is over. Everyone return to your workstations immediately or face immediate termination. But his threats had lost their power. Too many people were standing. Too many voices were speaking truth, and too much evidence had already been shared with external authorities. The psychological foundation of his empire was crumbling in real time. Sarah Chen, the head of human resources, stood up from her position on the side of the auditorium. Marcus, I can't participate in this anymore. The employee files you've asked me to maintain violate privacy laws and basic human decency. I've been documenting these violations, and I've already submitted my resignation along with evidence of systematic abuse. The revelation that even senior management was rebelling against Marcus Williams sent shockwaves through the remaining loyal employees. If someone at Sarah's level was willing to risk her career to expose the truth, then the situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. Marcus Williams's phone began buzzing insistently. Emma recognized this as the signal that Lisa Chen's media contacts were beginning to publish their stories about TechVision Industries. By now, local news stations would be running segments about corporate abuse, and social media would be spreading the documentation that Emma's group had gathered. Security, Marcus Williams shouted, his composure completely shattered. Remove these people from the building immediately. But the security guards, who were also TechVision employees subject to the same abuse and manipulation, remained motionless. They had heard enough to understand that they were witnessing a justified rebellion against systematic oppression. Emma looked around the auditorium at her colleagues' faces. Fear was being replaced by anger. Isolation was being replaced by solidarity, and desperation was being replaced by hope. Marcus Williams had built his empire on the assumption that desperate people would never unite against him. He had been catastrophically wrong. The confrontation was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Marcus Williams' greatest strength, his ability to control information and isolate his victims, had become his greatest weakness when those victims finally found each other and spoke truth to his manufactured authority. Emma Rodriguez spent the next month carefully observing and documenting everything at TechVision Industries. She carried a small notebook disguised as a daily planner, recording conversations, noting policy violations, and tracking the systematic abuse that Marcus Williams had normalized throughout the company. Her breakthrough came during a late evening when she was working alone on the development floor. Emma discovered that her computer access card also worked on the executive level, apparently due to an oversight in the security system. Instead of reporting it, she decided to use this opportunity to gather evidence. The executive floor at night was eerily quiet, illuminated only by emergency lighting and the glow of city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma's heart pounded as she made her way to Marcus Williams's office. His secretary's desk contained a treasure trove of information. Employee files with handwritten notes about personal vulnerabilities, internal memos discussing strategies to maximize employee desperation, and correspondence with board members about maintaining optimal pressure levels on staff. One document particularly caught Emma's attention. It was a detailed psychological profile system that Marcus Williams had developed to categorize employees based on their susceptibility to manipulation. Categories included financial desperation, family medical crisis, career desperation, and social isolation. Each employee had been assigned scores in these categories, with recommendations for specific pressure tactics. Emma found her own file in the stack. She was classified as high financial desperation and family medical crisis with a note that read, "Excellent candidate for extended exploitation. Father's medical bills ensure compliance. Recommend gradually increasing workload while maintaining salary below market rate. Monitor for signs of resistance." The clinical coldness of the assessment made Emma's hands shake with anger. Marcus Williams had reduced human beings to data points in his strategy for psychological manipulation. Every employee's personal tragedy had been cataloged and weaponized against them. Emma photographed dozens of documents with her phone, being careful to avoid triggering any security systems. She also discovered audio recordings that Marcus Williams apparently kept of employee meetings, including confidential HR discussions and performance reviews. These recordings revealed his true thoughts about the people who worked for him. In one particularly damning recording, Marcus Williams discussed his hiring strategy with the head of HR. "I want people who are already broken by life circumstances. Confident, financially secure people are harder to control. Give me someone drowning in debt with a sick family member, and I can make them work 100-hour weeks while thanking me for the opportunity." As Emma gathered evidence, she began reaching out carefully to other employees who seemed equally frustrated with TechVision's toxic culture. She started with David Rodriguez, the financial analyst who had looked so defeated in the elevator. During a casual conversation in the parking garage, Emma mentioned her concerns about workplace conditions. "Sometimes I wonder if other tech companies operate like this," Emma said carefully, testing David's response. David looked around nervously before responding. "I've worked at 3 other companies and none of them were anything like TechVision. Marcus Williams has created something uniquely horrible here." Gradually, Emma built a network of employees who were secretly documenting their experiences at TechVision. There was Janet from the development team, who had been denied promised promotions for 2 years while her workload doubled. Mike from network security had been forced to implement surveillance systems to monitor employee computer usage and bathroom breaks. Sarah from accounting had been asked to manipulate expense reports to inflate executive bonuses while denying basic benefits to lower-level employees. The group met in secret, usually during lunch breaks at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the TechVision building. They shared their evidence and developed a strategy for exposing Marcus Williams's systematic abuse. Emma emerged as the natural leader, having gathered the most comprehensive documentation of the company's predatory practices. Their investigation revealed that Marcus Williams's behavior extended far beyond harsh management. He had been systematically violating labor laws, manipulating financial records to hide the true cost of his high-turnover business model, and using company resources to investigate employees' personal lives for blackmail purposes. The group discovered that Marcus Williams had hired private investigators to gather information about employees, family members, medical conditions, and financial situations. This information was then used to apply precise psychological pressure to prevent resignations and union organization attempts. Emma found evidence that Marcus Williams had deliberately sabotaged employees' external job opportunities by providing false references and spreading rumors within the tech industry. Several talented programmers had been effectively blacklisted from other companies after attempting to leave TechVision. The most shocking discovery was a secret fund that Marcus Williams used to pay for employees' family medical expenses and emergency situations. On the surface, this appeared generous, but the documentation revealed it was actually a sophisticated debt bondage system. Employees who accepted this assistance were required to sign agreements that essentially made them indentured servants to TechVision Industries. As the evidence mounted, Emma realized they needed external help to take on someone as powerful as Marcus Williams. She reached out to investigative journalist Lisa Chen, who had written several articles about corporate abuse in the tech industry. Lisa was initially skeptical, but became intensely interested when Emma shared some of the documented evidence. "This is extraordinary," Lisa said during their secret meeting at a downtown restaurant. "I've covered corporate abuse for 10 years, and I've never seen anything this systematic and calculated. Marcus Williams has essentially created a modern-day sweatshop disguised as a high-tech company." Lisa agreed to investigate TechVision Industries, but warned Emma about the risks. "Marcus Williams has enough money and connections to destroy careers and lives. If we're going to expose him, we need to be absolutely certain our evidence is bulletproof and our timing is perfect." Meanwhile, Marcus Williams seemed oblivious to the growing resistance within his company. He continued his psychological manipulation tactics, increasing pressure on employees and implementing new surveillance measures. He announced a company retreat designed to strengthen team cohesion, which the secret resistance group recognized as an opportunity for Marcus Williams to identify and eliminate potential troublemakers. Emma volunteered to attend the retreat as an intelligence-gathering mission for their group. The 3-day event at a remote mountain resort would put employees in an isolated environment where Marcus Williams could observe their behavior and loyalty more closely. The retreat agenda included mandatory team-building exercises, individual performance consultations, and evening social events that were actually psychological evaluation sessions. Emma realized that Marcus Williams was using the retreat to identify employees who might pose threats to his control system. During the second day of the retreat, Emma witnessed Marcus Williams's manipulation techniques in their purest form. He organized trust exercises that were designed to break down employees' psychological defenses and make them more susceptible to his influence. He used group therapy techniques to encourage employees to share personal vulnerabilities, then took notes for future exploitation. The most disturbing moment came during a group dinner when Marcus Williams delivered a speech about loyalty and sacrifice. He spoke about how TechVision Industries was like a family, and how family members must sometimes endure hardship for the greater good. His words were designed to normalize the abuse and make employees feel guilty for questioning their treatment. Emma recorded the speech secretly, capturing Marcus Williams's manipulative rhetoric and the uncomfortable silence of employees who were too afraid to respond honestly. This recording would become crucial evidence in the case building against him. On the final day of the retreat, Marcus Williams announced a new policy requiring employees to sign updated contracts with more restrictive non-compete clauses and mandatory arbitration agreements. These contracts would make it virtually impossible for employees to leave TechVision or seek legal recourse for workplace abuse. Emma knew that time was running out. Marcus Williams was consolidating his control and eliminating potential escape routes for his victims. The evidence-gathering phase of their resistance needed to transition into active exposure of his crimes. The carefully built case against Marcus Williams was nearly complete, but implementing it would require courage that could cost Emma and her allies everything they had worked for. Emma Rodriguez had been working at TechVision Industries for 3 months, and every day felt like walking through a minefield. The 23-year-old software developer had graduated with honors from a state university, carrying $60,000 in student debt and dreams of building innovative technology. Instead, she found herself trapped in a corporate nightmare where creativity went to die. Her cubicle sat in the middle of the development floor, surrounded by 30 other programmers who barely spoke above whispers. The atmosphere was suffocating. Conversations stopped when managers walked by. Lunch breaks were taken alone at desks. Even bathroom visits were timed and noted by supervisors. Emma's direct manager, Tom Bradley, was a 40-year-old man who had learned to survive at TechVision by becoming Marcus Williams's perfect puppet. Tom had once been an innovative programmer himself, but 5 years at the company had drained the life from his eyes and replaced it with paranoid vigilance. "Emma, your code review scores are adequate, but adequate isn't exceptional," Tom said during their weekly one-on-one meeting. Mr. Williams expects exceptional from everyone on this team. I need you to put in extra hours this week to optimize the customer database module." Emma bit back her response. The customer database was already running efficiently, but questioning assignments was career suicide at TechVision. She had learned this lesson by watching 3 colleagues get terminated in her first month for asking too many questions. "Of course, Tom. Should I prioritize that over the security update project?" "Do both. Sleep is for people who lack commitment." Tom's words echoed something Marcus Williams had said during a company meeting. Everything at TechVision eventually traced back to their CEO's philosophy. After Tom left, Emma stared at her computer screen, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. She was working 70-hour weeks for a salary that barely covered her student loan payments and basic living expenses. The promised promotion opportunities never materialized. The stock options were structured so unfavorably that they were essentially worthless. During her lunch break, Emma overheard a conversation between 2 senior developers in the break room. They were discussing Marcus Williams' latest directive about the new intern program. "He specifically asked HR to target vulnerable candidates," said Janet, a programmer who had been with the company for 4 years. "People with family medical bills, recent graduates with massive debt, anyone desperate enough to accept terrible working conditions." "That's the Marcus Williams formula," replied her colleague, Mike. "Find people who can't afford to quit, then squeeze every ounce of productivity from them until they burn out. When they break, replace them with fresh victims." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She was exactly the type of person Marcus Williams had targeted. Her father's recent heart attack had left her family with crushing medical bills, making her TechVision salary absolutely essential, despite the toxic work environment. That afternoon, Emma witnessed Marcus Williams in action during a company-wide meeting. He stood at the front of the auditorium like a general addressing troops, his presence commanding absolute attention. "I've been reviewing our productivity metrics," Marcus announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. "Some departments are performing below expectations. This is unacceptable." He clicked to a presentation slide showing department rankings. Emma's development team was listed in red, labeled as needs improvement. Departments in red will be subject to enhanced performance monitoring, Marcus continued. This means extended work hours, weekend availability, and weekly individual performance reviews. Those who cannot meet these enhanced standards will be replaced by people who can. Emma watched her colleagues' faces around the auditorium. Fear was the dominant expression, mixed with resignation and barely contained anger. These were talented, educated professionals being treated like expendable resources. After the meeting, Emma found herself in the elevator with David Rodriguez, the financial analyst she had heard rumors about. David looked exhausted, his usually neat appearance disheveled and his hands shaking slightly. "Rough week?" Emma asked quietly. David glanced around the elevator nervously before responding. "Marcus has me working on projects that make me uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. But my mom's medical bills." His voice trailed off. Emma understood. They were all trapped by their financial obligations, forced to compromise their values and well-being to keep their jobs. Marcus Williams had created a system that weaponized their desperation against them. That evening, Emma stayed late to work on the unnecessary database optimization Tom had demanded. The office was nearly empty, just a few other victims of Marcus Williams's productivity obsession. Around 9 o'clock, she decided to take a break and walk to the kitchen area for coffee. As she passed Marcus Williams's office, she noticed the door was slightly open and voices were coming from inside. She knew she should keep walking, but something made her pause and listen. "The beauty of the system is its self-sustaining nature," Marcus was saying to someone. "Desperate employees police themselves and each other. They're so afraid of losing their jobs that they'll report colleagues who aren't working hard enough. They become enforcers of their own oppression." "But what about long-term employee development?" asked a voice Emma recognized as Robert Crane from the board of directors. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Development is for companies that can't extract maximum value immediately. Why invest in developing someone over 5 years when you can burn them out in 2 and replace them with fresh talent? The labor market provides an endless supply of desperate graduates." Emma felt sick. Marcus Williams wasn't just a demanding boss. He was a predator who systematically destroyed people's lives for profit. He had turned human desperation into a business model. Over the following weeks, Emma began paying closer attention to the patterns at TechVision. She noticed how Marcus Williams deliberately hired people with financial vulnerabilities. She saw how he structured compensation packages to maximize dependence while minimizing actual benefits. She observed how he used performance reviews as weapons to keep employees in constant fear. The most disturbing realization was how Marcus Williams seemed to enjoy the psychological manipulation. During team meetings, Emma watched him deliver criticism with a subtle smile, as if he derived pleasure from watching people's confidence crumble. He would praise employees just enough to keep them hoping, then destroy that hope with impossible demands. Emma also noticed how the toxic culture had infected everyone at TechVision. Good people had become suspicious and paranoid. Collaboration had been replaced by competition for survival. Innovation had died under the weight of fear and micromanagement. One particularly difficult day, Emma found herself working until midnight to meet an artificially compressed deadline. As she packed up her laptop, she made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't continue being a victim of Marcus Williams's system. She needed to find a way to fight back. But Emma wasn't naive. She knew that direct confrontation with Marcus Williams would result in immediate termination and professional blacklisting. He had the power to destroy careers with a few phone calls to industry contacts. Any resistance would need to be subtle, strategic, and absolutely secret. As Emma walked to her car in the empty parking garage, she began formulating a plan. Marcus Williams had built his empire on exploiting people's desperation and fear. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the intelligence and determination of the people he was exploiting. Emma realized that Marcus Williams's greatest strength, his absolute control over information and people, could also become his greatest weakness. If someone could gather enough evidence of his systematic abuse and manipulation, if someone could document his predatory business practices, if someone could unite his victims instead of keeping them isolated and afraid, then maybe his empire could be brought down from within. Marcus Williams stood at the massive glass windows of the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he ruled. At 38, he had built TechVision Industries from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. His employees called him a visionary. The media called him ruthless. Marcus preferred the latter. The morning sun cast long shadows across his corner office as he reviewed the quarterly reports. Profits were up 30%, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Marcus had learned early in life that people were tools, and tools existed to serve a purpose. His father, a factory worker who died broke and forgotten, had taught him that lesson through his failure. Sarah Chen knocked softly on the door before entering. As his head of human resources, she had been with the company for 8 years, climbing from an entry-level position through sheer determination. Marcus respected her efficiency, though he found her moral compass irritating at times. "The new intern program applications are ready for your review," Sarah said, placing a thick folder on his mahogany desk. "We have over 2,000 applicants for 50 positions." Marcus barely glanced up from his computer screen. "Filter them down to the most desperate ones. I want people who need this opportunity so badly they'll do anything to keep it." Sarah hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we focus on qualifications and potential?" "Potential doesn't create loyalty, Sarah. Desperation does." Marcus finally looked at her, his steel gray eyes cold and calculating. "I want interns who will work weekends without complaint, stay late without question, and follow orders without hesitation. Find me the ones with student loans drowning them, the ones supporting sick family members, the ones who see this internship as their only shot at escaping poverty." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's assistant announcing his 10 o'clock meeting. 5 department heads filed into the office, each carrying reports and wearing expressions of barely concealed anxiety. Marcus enjoyed these meetings. They reminded everyone who held the power. "Sales numbers are down in the Southeast region," announced Jennifer Walsh, the sales director. Her voice trembled slightly. "We're working on new strategies to—" "I don't want strategies," Marcus cut her off. "I want results. And I want them by month end. or I'll find someone who can deliver them." The room fell silent. Marcus had built his reputation on such moments. He demanded absolute obedience, and those who couldn't deliver simply disappeared from the company. No second chances, no excuses, no mercy. After the meeting, Marcus called in David Rodriguez, a 24-year-old analyst who had been with the company for 2 years. David was brilliant with numbers but lacked the killer instinct Marcus valued. Today that would change. "David, I have a special project for you," Marcus said, his tone friendly but somehow menacing. "I need you to analyze our competitors' financial data. All of it. Every detail you can find." David shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, some of that information might be proprietary. How would we legally obtain—" "Don't worry about the how," Marcus interrupted. "That's not your concern. Your concern is completing the assignment I've given you. Your performance review is coming up, and I'd hate for your family's financial situation to become even more challenging." The threat was subtle but clear. David's mother was undergoing expensive cancer treatments, and his salary was the family's only stable income. Marcus had made it his business to know such details about all his employees. Information was power, and power was control. As David left the office, Marcus felt the familiar satisfaction of watching someone bend to his will. He had created a culture where employees competed not just for promotions but for survival. Fear motivated people far better than inspiration ever could. The afternoon brought a meeting with the board of directors. These were Marcus's peers in wealth and influence, but even they treated him with a mixture of respect and wariness. His results spoke for themselves, but his methods raised eyebrows. "Marcus, we've received some concerning reports about employee turnover," said board member Robert Crane, a silver-haired man who had built his own fortune in real estate. 35% annual turnover is significantly higher than industry standards." Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. "Turnover eliminates the weak. The employees who stay are the ones who understand what it takes to succeed. Quality over quantity, Robert." "But the cost of constantly training new staff," another board member began, "is less than the cost of keeping mediocre employees," Marcus finished. "I've built this company on a simple principle. Absolute dedication yields absolute rewards. Those who can't commit fully don't deserve to be here." The board members exchanged glances but said nothing more. Marcus's profit silenced most criticism, and his shareholders cared more about returns than employee satisfaction surveys. That evening, Marcus hosted a company dinner for top performers. The ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel glittered with chandeliers and success. Employees dressed in their finest clothes mingled nervously, knowing their CEO was watching and evaluating every interaction. Marcus took the stage to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, you represent the best of Tech Vision Industries. You've proven your worth through your obedience, your dedication, and your results. In return, I've provided you with opportunities most people only dream of." The applause was enthusiastic but somehow hollow. Marcus noticed several employees avoiding direct eye contact, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. No matter. Respect born from fear was still respect. "Over the next 6 months, we'll be implementing new performance standards," Marcus continued. "Those who excel will find themselves richly rewarded. Those who fall short will find themselves seeking opportunities elsewhere. I believe in survival of the fittest, and this company will continue to evolve accordingly." As the evening wound down, Marcus observed his employees from across the room. They laughed at the right moments, networked appropriately, and maintained the facade of company loyalty. But he could see the tension in their shoulders, the careful way they chose their words, the constant awareness of being watched and judged. This was his kingdom, built on a foundation of controlled fear and calculated rewards. Marcus had created a machine that generated wealth through the systematic exploitation of human desperation and ambition. His employees might not love him, but they needed him, and that need gave him absolute power over their lives and futures. What Marcus didn't realize, as he stood surveying his empire that night, was that empires built on fear often contain the seeds of their own destruction, and sometimes those seeds are planted by the very people who seem most loyal and obedient.